Kenosha Community Television.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Shaking Up Kenosha. My name is Jeff Roberts and I'll be your host for this series. Today we have with us from Kenosha County Adult Protective Services, Rebecca Dutter. Rebecca, tell us a little bit about what Protective Services really is.
Sure. Adult Protective Services is, we work with people who are over the age of 60 who are considered elder at risk by Wisconsin statutes, those who may be experiencing abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation. And we also work with people who are under the age of 60, so those from age 18 on to about 59, where they have a disabling condition, whether it's a physical condition, a cognitive condition, where they might also be at risk of abuse, neglect, or some form of exploitation.
Any type of thing that would happen can normally happen between that age group, but I noticed you cut it off at 18, so in Wisconsin everyone 18 and over is considered to be an adult.
Correct.
For this particular issue.
Yep.
What got you interested in this kind of work?
Well, I think it's a fascinating thing to work with. It's certainly sometimes a very sobering thing to work with. I think what's important is that we have a society right now where we're seeing a lot of crimes that are committed against older people and people with disabilities, and oftentimes they don't have a voice. So to be able to give a voice to someone who has been victimized or abused is something I think that made me really interested in it, and I think you continue to go and do work like this because it's in a way it's such a personal, nice thing to watch when you're able to assist somebody along that path.
How long have you been doing this?
This is my 17th year.
Wow.
Yes. Long time.
How does one become a person who works in that office? How do you do that?
Well, a lot of our people, we're very lucky that we don't have a lot of turnover in Adult Protective Services. We have a lot of folks that have been there a long time. Our department is housed within the Aging and Disability Resource Center, so we have a lot of staff that's in the Aging and Disability Resource Center. Sometimes our interns that we get from our local colleges become our staff members, but most of our staff are social workers that have moved on and are working within the older population and those with disabilities now.
When you have a person who is going through a traumatic event in their life, and it's now one of those times where your services are going to be needed, or your office's services, what in the world do you do? How do you get that started?
Sure. Well, the principle of the Aging and Disability Resource Centers in Wisconsin has been that we're supposed to be a one-stop shop. So people who come down into our department can find resources, whether it's about housing, whether it's about Meals on Wheels, certainly if you believe that someone is being abused or exploited, long-term care programs related to Medicare, Medicaid, benefits, those things. So the first stop is actually just to walk in the door or to call our number and let us know what your problem is and what we can start to assist you with. And I actually tell people to call before an issue comes up, because there's a lot of resources and services that people just aren't aware of, that with that call, at least if they don't need it now, it's something that they can put in their back of their head to know that it's available for later on.
And this is one of those situations where when a medical emergency arises, usually by then it's too late.
Right.
There's not much that can be done, can there?
Well, yes and no. When we talk about advanced directives, and advanced directives are something that a person certainly would draft when they're capable of doing that. What's misunderstood in the state of Wisconsin, I think, oftentimes is that we are a state that doesn't allow family members to make long-term care decisions for someone unless they've been appointed as their power of attorney for health care. So if someone is obviously in an immediate emergency decision, family is certainly always allowed to make those type of decisions. But if there's decisions post that, say, someone's had a stroke and their cognitive ability just doesn't come back quickly and they need placement in a rehab facility, or they need services in their home and they're not able to make those decisions, if they haven't drafted an advance directive, then unfortunately there is no one that can make those choices for them, and they would have to go through the process of a court-appointed legal guardianship to get a decision maker appointed for them. We have a lot of families that call into our office that say, I've been married to my spouse for 50-some years, and of course I can make decisions for him if the time comes. But the reality is that Wisconsin law does not allow that. So for everyone to have an advance directive completed certainly protects them to have a voice, to be able to choose who they want to make those decisions if that day ever comes.
Now, what's the real difference between a living will and a power of attorney?
Well, they're both considered an advance directive. The difference is that in a power of attorney for healthcare, you're actually naming who you want to make decisions for you. So you're able to say, I would like my husband, my wife, my son, my daughter. In a living will is also called a declaration to physicians. And it's basically you telling your doctor, in case these things happen, these are the decisions I would like to have done. But they don't direct someone to make those choices for you. It's just you declaring to your doctor, if I'm at the end of my life, or if I'm in a persistent vegetative state, or if you're telling me that I have a terminal diagnosis, these are the treatments that I would like or I would not like to have happen. But it doesn't give you that person. So if you become incapacitated during that time, you're still going to need a power of attorney for health care so that you have someone who can make those choices for you.
Now, when, just kind of thinking about that, that brings up an interesting point about if you are able to recover, the patient's able to recover, what happens with that document then?
Well, the nice thing, there's several nice things about the way that Wisconsin has designed their powers of attorney is first of all, it's considered a dormant document. So if you and I sign a document today, it doesn't give anybody any power today. It only becomes effective when two doctors have stated that you're incapable or incapacitated to make health-related decisions. If you regain capacity, so you've had the stroke, you've now recovered, the document then goes back into its dormant state where you now are making the decisions yourself. And that's contrary to what a legal guardianship would do. A legal guardianship would appoint someone to be your guardian, and it's a permanent type situation. So in order to get that reversed, you'd have to go all the way back through the court process.
Now, what happens in the case of like insurance companies where insurance companies have a responsibility to pay certain amounts of medical costs? If the person who's been selected to run the affairs and make those kind of decisions, if they change some of that, can it be reversed again after the person gets better, or is it now stuck?
No, well, there's two types of powers of attorney. Well, there's several types of advance directives when we talk about generally advance directives. When we're talking about powers of attorney, there's powers of attorney for healthcare and there's powers of attorney for finances. And oftentimes the person that you name to be that person is different. They both can be undone at any point in time. Okay. So if situations change or you need to change things in your life, those documents can just be redrafted and it nullifies the document that was drafted previously.
Okay. Now, what happens when, say, for example, something were to happen to me medically? My wife would come to your office and say, all right, what do I do? Right. What's that first step?
Well, the first step actually, that's actually beyond the first step, because if we're at that point, we don't have a lot of options available to us. If you're to the point where the doctors are saying you can't make those decisions and you haven't done an advance directive, then the step is going to be the legal guardianship step, which is a court process. It's a lengthy process. It requires lawyers. It requires doctors' reports. It requires court hearings. It's not a pleasant experience for most people. And it's also where you become deemed incompetent and you lose some of your constitutional rights, like the right to vote, the right to marry, those type of things. If you had started earlier and you'd created that power of attorney for health care, then when the time came, if you weren't able to make those decisions, two doctors say, he's incapacitated, he's not able to do this, and if your wife was named at that as the agent, then your wife then steps into that role. Mm-hmm. And there's no legal involvement that has to be had at all. She's able then to take on the role immediately of making those decisions.
When that kind of a situation comes up, and even when you're doing the pre-planning, which we wish everyone would.
Yes, we do.
But if they can't or they don't know what to do,
sure,
is the best option to go to a family attorney to start that process?
Well, the power of attorney for healthcare is actually a free document that the state puts out. Anybody could come down to the Aging and Disability Resource Center here in Kenosha, and we would be happy to help them draft that document. Mm-hmm. It's a very simple document. One of the only things that really needs to be done is it needs to be signed in front of two witnesses who are unrelated to you or who are not healthcare providers. So as long as that is done, it's a simple document. It doesn't always require an attorney. People can certainly choose to go to an attorney if they want, if they've got specific wishes that they really want to place in the document. However, the way that Wisconsin has designed it, it doesn't really necessarily need an attorney to be involved in the creation of the healthcare power of attorney.
Now, with the creation of that document, so that you are making your medical wishes known and who you want them to do it, a regular power of attorney for the financial side is always a good idea. Are there any other documents that you would need?
Well, I always caution people about the power of attorney for finances because oftentimes the power of attorney for finances is different than the power of attorney for healthcare. You have to be careful about the wording. The state document, actually, the minute you sign it, you can have your agent now responsible for your finances immediately. Unlike the power of attorney for healthcare, where you have to be incapacitated by two doctors to be able to take on that role. So you have to be, yes, you have to be very careful to read the document. You can certainly write that into the document that, I only want someone to help handle my finances if I've been declared incapacitated by two doctors. But you have to be careful about the wording of that document and the powers that you're giving to someone over your finances that are hard to undo if you're giving them that power before you're
Very
actually
hard.
in need it. Mm-hmm.
Now, what in the case of reciprocity? So, like, for example, if someone from my family were to be incapacitated outside of the state of Wisconsin, like in Illinois, for example, to get hospitalized in Illinois, do the same rules apply?
No, every state has different rules. Illinois is a little bit different. They are a next of kin state, which means that the next of kin is able to make those type of decisions, unlike Wisconsin. Good or bad, I guess you could argue either way that some people like that, some people don't. But if they're going to be coming into the state of Wisconsin, say your relative is going to be moving up by you, they would have to have documents that comply with what our state says they need to have up here. So just having someone that next of kin relationship is not going to be something that is going to comply with the law of Wisconsin.
But they have to be a resident of the state of Wisconsin. No.
Well, we have a lot of people, the snowbirds, that go from different states. And what we always tell people is to make sure that you're aware of what the rules are, the laws are in both of the states. Because if you draft a document in Wisconsin and you spend, say, 6 months in Arizona or whatever it might be, you would hope that Arizona would honor Wisconsin's document. However, they may have different rules that aren't included in our document that would make them sort of nullified here. So it's always a good idea to kind of check out both states to make sure that you're in compliance with the way that both of them do it.
Okay. And with that, it's time for us to take a pause for the cause. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You're watching Kenosha Community Television.
Welcome back. We're here with Rebecca Dutton.
Dutter.
I knew I'd get it wrong. I have to do that at least once. We were talking about having that conversation when someone's incapacitated, someone is no longer able to make decisions on their own. What do you do next? And I think that starts the conversation off is when that family member or that trusted person is sitting right in front of you, and now you've got to have that conversation with them. How do you start that conversation, and what happens next?
Sure. Well, I think what's interesting is sometimes these conversations just occur naturally. There's an article in the newspaper or something, you see a case on TV, or there's something that's going on even in your own family where you realize these are really important conversations to have. I mean, we can talk all day long about drafting documents, but really at the end of the day, what's most important is the person to know that this is your document. These are your wishes. And if I nominate you to make my decisions for me as my agent, and we never have that conversation about what I want, how really effective is the document? Yes, now you can make legal decisions for me, but I've really put you in the predicament of making decisions that we may never have had that conversation about. So what's important is to have the conversation before you complete the document. The reality is, when you create these documents, you need to think about who is best to become your agent. It may not necessarily be the closest person to you. It may not be your spouse. It may not be your adult child. It might be a trusted friend who you know can make some of these tough decisions. I always tell people that creating these documents is like giving your family a gift, because you're giving them the gift of peace, and you're giving them the gift that when something happens or if something happens, they don't have to make the tough decisions. You've made that for them. And so to start the conversation, a lot of people just say, hey, I watched this TV show, or I saw this article in the newspaper, and I think that we need to sit down and really talk about what my wishes are. I think conversations regarding this have become really way more known than they used to be because of some pretty prominent cases. Like, I think we all know about the Terry Schiavo case from Florida, and that sort of brought a lot of this to the forefront of when is early enough to talk about these things. And we're going to tell you that 18 is the time when you become an adult, and it's the time when parents can no longer make decisions for you. So the document can be drafted as early as someone is 18, up until they're as old as they are. The document can be changed at any time a person's situation changes, because clearly we all have preferences that change, or people in our lives that are more important that we want in the document. So just the basic conversation of, I've thought about this, and here's what I want you to know. If something should happen to me, I want you to have the peace of knowing that it's okay for you to make these decisions for me. And agents who become the power of attorney, they're given a lot of guidance by the doctors, by the medical community. So even though we say they're making really tough decisions, and they are, they get a lot of support by a lot of different people telling them, this is really probably the right choice, or here's the repercussions if you choose this, or so although having the conversation is really important, it's also important to assure the agent that you're really not alone if you are to take on this role.
I think it's really going to be important for a lot of people to know, too, that there is a support mechanism behind all of this. It's not just a visit to your office to get the document filled out and get it signed. And we were talking off camera, and you mentioned that you have to have 2 witnesses sign the document who are not related to you.
Right.
When all of that is said and done and you've made your decisions, there's a support mechanism. The support mechanism starts whenever the doctors sign off saying, okay, this is it. This person can no longer handle their own decisions. That kind of kicks into gear a lot of things, doesn't it?
It does. And when you create this document, I think it's important to also have the conversation with your doctor. If you're thinking about these things and you're thinking about specific wishes that you have, people really have strong opinions about whether they want CPR, whether they want tube feedings if they can't eat. And I don't think you can ever, I'm constantly shocked by the decisions that people, even in my own life, will say, I want this or I don't want that. When I thought all along, well, that's really not what my choice would have been for you, so I'm glad we had that conversation. So it's important to talk to the doctor. It's important for the doctor to know that you've created this document. So once you've completed the document, obviously you need to keep a copy of your document. A copy should go to your doctor's office or in the medical records department or whatever hospital system you use. Your agent should have a copy. And then we always tell people, make additional copies to put in different places, because if you cannot produce the document, then the document doesn't exist when it comes time to activate it.
And that's kind of strange, too, because when you think about it, if it's a document or a power of attorney, you'd already mentioned you have to revisit this thing. And if you can't produce it,
right,
how can you revisit?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of people don't revisit it. And, there's nothing magical out there that says, you should do this once a year, or you should revisit it twice a year. What we tell people to do is you need to revisit this document when your situation changes. If you've got a new diagnosis that changes your opinion of what your life quality could be if CPR happens, you need to look at the document. If the agents who are under, that you've nominated to be your agents have changed, someone has passed away, someone has moved away, someone you don't feel comfortable with anymore, that's the time to change the document. But it's important for people to revisit those documents, just like it's important for you to revisit your will. It's important for you to revisit a lot of those things, because if the time comes and again you can't produce it, or worse, someone produces the document and the wishes you have in there are not what you want today. That can be a real uncomfortable situation for people.
Speaking about uncomfortable, there's been a lot of high-profile cases where someone was kept alive medically for an extended period of time because that was their wish or the family's wish. Then when they wake up, they're not the same.
Right.
Does that normally create a problem for the families or to the loved ones later on?
Well, it can, and I think it's important that people have had that discussion. There are people who feel very strongly, whether it's because of their religious belief, whether it's a medical belief, whether it's just a personal belief, that they never want to be in that type of situation, that they don't even want to take the chance that I could come out maybe different. It does, if someone does recover and they don't recover quite 100%, the agent does have some decisions that they need to make long term. You know, they have to decide what's the best living arrangement for them. You know, do they need supportive services? Do they need medical services? And it does, becoming an agent under a power of attorney for healthcare can be a big responsibility for people. It's also a big honor if somebody trusts you enough to make you that person. But there are decisions long term. I mean, it's not just during that initial crisis. These decisions have to go on long term for an agent.
When we look at a power of attorney and all the legal aspects, because we're dealing with people with mortgages, you're dealing with car loans, you're dealing with, oh my goodness, a wide variety of credit issues and personal and family decisions that have to be made. When those decisions get made, and they're being made by someone that you trust, what happens normally to that person, you know, after it's all said and done, and if the person does pass away who was incapacitated?
Right.
Does that revert to like a will, and they're allowed to do some certain things, or is it just, okay, the medical issues are solved, stop, now the will takes over?
Right. That's exactly what happens. The power of attorney's power ceases when the person passes away. So it's important while you're the agent or while you're the person creating the document to also maybe talk about funeral arrangements, maybe talk about these are some of the decisions that I want when I'm not here to make those choices. What I think is also what you brought up too is that when you are an agent under the power of attorney for finances, you are never responsible for the debt of the person that you're taking care of. So you never have to worry about them coming back and saying, well, you owe this hospital bill now for your person because they racked up this debt. It's important for them to understand that they're not responsible for it. Their responsibility when you're using somebody else's funds is to ensure that they're being used properly, that you're not giving them away inappropriately, that you're not making bad choices that could impact the person's financial security long term, that you're really being a good fiduciary, that you're investing wisely, those type of things. But when the time comes that the person passes away, the will then would definitely take over and the person's power ceases at that point.
When we look at the documentation, there's always a document trail. We have to have paper. For some odd reason, we have to have paper. We're supposedly living in a paperless society, but we've got more paper now to deal with than we ever have.
Right.
So we're dealing with the power of attorney. We're dealing with a medical document that someone's going to be responsible for that incapacitated person.
Right.
We're dealing with wills.
Right.
Do sometimes those documents all contradict each other? Do they kind of get in the way of each other?
Well, they can, especially when you've got people that make different decisions. In the perfect world, you choose the same person to make a decision for your power of attorney for healthcare and a power of attorney for finances.
But we both know there's no such thing as a perfect world.
Not a perfect world. So what what the person has to think about is, who do you trust to make these decisions? And sometimes the person you choose to be the executor of your will is the person you chose to be your power of attorney for finances. Sometimes it's not.
Wow.
You know, there's a lot of families that feel you have 3 or 4 children that you need to sort of spread that responsibility out. So you're going to have a person who's the power of attorney for healthcare, another child who's the power of attorney for finances, another child who's the executor of the will. There could be another child who's the trustee under a trust.
Oh my goodness.
But I think every family deals with that differently. There are some families that want to sort of spread the anxiety a little bit, if you want to say that, or there's a lot of families that say, this particular person is someone I trust, and we're going to go with them for all of that. It's important that that they're consistent, though, as far as what your wishes are, that you stay consistent with those. And if your wishes change, that you update all of those documents.
When someone comes to Kenosha County from, like, say, for example, out in one of the other counties in the state of Wisconsin, could there be differences in the law in the way that the county would treat this?
No, it's a state. The power of attorneys are all, these advance directives are all state drafted documents, so they're going to be accepted in all of the counties. There's not going to be any difference. There are a couple differences especially when you're talking about the power of attorney for healthcare. There's a lot of different terms that are used, and there's several different documents that all are the same thing. Essentially, they're just called different things.
Okay.
Wisconsin's, it's called the statutory power of attorney for healthcare form. That's the free document the state puts out. It's a very basic form. It covers the law. It covers some decisions that need to be made. It allows you room to write in some additional decisions, and then it names the people that you want to be your agents. There's also a document called the 5 Wishes. It is a power of attorney for healthcare form, so you should not have both documents. The 5 Wishes document was drafted by people outside of the state of Wisconsin, but it's compliant in many states. So it crosses over into a lot of different states, whereas sometimes just the Wisconsin document doesn't do that. Not all the states accept this 5 Wishes document, but the majority of them do. And it has, it's more comprehensive. It asks more questions. It talks about religious beliefs. It talks about end-of-life decisions more. Instead of just being those basic decisions, it really goes more into depth. There's also then a document out there that's called Honoring Choices or Respecting Choices. Those are all kind of the same thing. But I guess what we need people to understand is those are all the same type of document. So you want to have one of those, not all of those that might be competing with each other. Because if that happens, there could be quite a mess in trying to resolve.
Yeah, then it's going to end up in the court system
It
anyway.
certainly could, absolutely.
To kind of wrap up, excuse me, the conversation, we know that there now is a plethora of documents that you have to, and it's a legal pathway that you have to weed your way through. When you're giving the advice to someone to sit down and read this, don't just sign off blindly.
Absolutely.
Read it and understand what it means.
Right.
What's the next step after that? When you've got them in the chair,
Right.
they're right there.
Right. Well, the next step is actually the completion of the documents. And once you've completed the documents and you've had those conversations, it's encouraging them to go back and have the conversations with the people they've chosen. Sometimes we have situations where a person is named as the agent and they're not even aware that they're named as the agent. That doesn't really help oftentimes. And then it's to certainly file that document. Copies to your agent, copies to your doctor, copy maybe to another family member, copy for yourself, making sure that those copies can be found in the event that you need those documents. That's the next step. But the conversation should never stop. You should keep having the conversation about, what your choices are.
Okay. Well, with that wraps up another show of Shaking Up Kenosha. Please help me thank our guest, Rebecca Dutter from Kenosha County Adult Protective Services. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time on Shaking Up Kenosha. Bye for now.
Are you camera shy but would like to get behind the scenes of the fun-filled world of television production? Then Kenosha TV just might be the place for you. Every week, your friends and neighbors on Kenosha TV create new programs. We always need people like you to help direct the shows, man the cameras, tweak the audio, and have a great time in producing programming for Kenosha viewers. No experience is necessary. Kenosha TV provides the training and equipment for you. For more information, give us a call or go to our website.